Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Aaron.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. The stranded Yazidi refugees trapped on a mountaintop in northern Iraq are finally being rescued. They've been stranded for more than a week with little food and water after Islamic State fighters forced them from their homes. Now Syrian Kurdish fighters have come to the rescue, carving out a pathway to safety for the Yazidis. Gary Lane has got the latest.
Weak and dehydrated, some of the Yazidis rescued from Iraq's Sinjar mountain have made it safely to this refugee camp just inside Syria. Many, like this little girl, needed immediate medical attention. Her feet blistered from the long, shoeless journey up and down the mountain.
The situation in the camp is still kind of primitive. We're trying to improve it, to make it better, to increase the tents. Lots of people are without tents. Toilets need to be increased to take out the numbers. For now, the estimated number is 12,000 persons.
Some of the elderly fell on the mountainside while fleeing the Islamic State militants. They're being treated for broken bones. The United Nations says as many as 150,000 more Iraqi refugees may arrive here within the next several days. A growing number of Iraqis, especially Christians, are seeking asylum in the West. The new head of the Anglican Church in Australia, Archbishop Philip Freer, says the Australian government should emulate France in granting asylum requests. And Justin Welby, the Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury, suggests the world can no longer turn a blind eye to the rising persecution of Christians.
What is happening right now in northern Iraq, though, is off the scale of the human terror that we've seen over recent years. In a globalized world where even distant nations are our neighbor, we cannot allow these atrocities to be unleashed with impunity.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel says the Pentagon will beef up its presence in northern Iraq.
I've recommended to the President, and the President has authorized me to go ahead and send about 130 new assessment team members up to northern Iraq in the Erbil area to take a closer look and give a more in-depth assessment of where we can continue to help the Iraqis.
And in Baghdad, it appears Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki is losing his grip on power. Members of his own party and a growing number of military supporters are distancing themselves from his divisive rule. That could mean Iraq is heading toward a more inclusive government. Gary Lane, CBN News.
And even though the Yazidis are escaping from that mountaintop, thousands more Iraqis are still in danger from the Islamic State. The militant army may now hold in its hands the means to do massive damage to the entire country. Chris Mitchell reports from northern Iraq.
When ISIS swallowed up large swaths of territory, they also captured what might be the biggest weapon of all in Iraq, the country's largest dam. The nightmare scenario for the world has been when a terror group gets their hands on a weapon of mass destruction. Now, just about a 2-hour drive from here in Erbil, northern Iraq, ISIS has done just that. When they captured the Mosul Dam, experts knew the group had a new weapon of terror.
We told this dam like an atomic bomb.
Kurdish civil engineer Adwa Jaji warns the Mosul Dam, once called the most dangerous dam in the world in the best of times, now represents a ticking time bomb in the hands of ISIS.
I think now it's too dangerous. Even it is not blasted by ISIS, the dam will destroy itself because there is nobody there to rehabilitate it.
Jaji says the dam was built on poor soil, needs a regular infusion of grout to stabilize it, and was poorly designed.
The dam is not designed to resist this type of earthquake.
If ISIS fails to maintain the dam, it could burst. Located above Mosul, he says that would be a catastrophe and send a wall of water 60 feet high towards Mosul and reach all the way to Baghdad.
Maybe 500, 600,000 people will killed in one day.
Jaji feels an international effort should be made to recapture and secure the dam. Even if ISIS does not destroy it, they could hold the country hostage with the threat of an ecological disaster. In the meantime, the U.S. continued its humanitarian airdrops for the stranded Yazidis and its airstrikes against ISIS positions. Peshmerga commanders on the front lines told CBN News when they take over a town, ISIS comes in like a lamb, but turns into a wolf.
First of all, they don't do anything. They say calm down until things get better. And then, when they have full control of an area, then they start killing people.
They threatened this Iraqi working in a power plant.
They said if you personally are not giving back the electricity, we will destroy your family.
Their barbarism is also spreading from one generation to the next. This picture of an Australian boy with the head of a Syrian soldier has gone viral. The boy's father, an ISIS fighter, said, "That's my boy."
It's just so hard to hear all these stories and imagine a human being doing this. You know, it's so hard. It's the work of the devil.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Erbil, Kurdistan.
Egypt's top Muslim cleric is condemning the Islamic State in Iraq for its bloody rampage across Iraq. Grand Mufti Shawkat Alam said the extremist group has tarnished the image of Islam and is violating its most sacred principles. He also called the group a terrorist organization whose atrocities could lead to the destruction of Muslim nations. He called for an international and regional response to the terrorist threat, saying the Arab world's future is facing a hard test.
Israel and Hamas are approaching the final hours of a 3-day ceasefire, and Israeli leaders are warning the world that they won't tolerate a terrorist enclave in Gaza. John Wagi has more on the war of words that could again become a shooting war.
The stakes are high for both sides. Gaza must rebuild from the pounding it has already taken, and Israelis are more than weary after a decade of rocket attacks that produce constant stress. But the chances of a long-lasting agreement don't look good. Israel's finance minister Yair Lapid says if Hamas doesn't agree to a ceasefire, Israel will strike harder than it did in the first wave of Operation Protective Shield. And Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman tells the Jerusalem Post that Israel must get rid of Hamas in order for there to be peace in the region. Whether Israel forges a temporary truce with Hamas or not, the country's leaders can count on another war from the Palestinians, a series of UN investigations and criminal charges in international courts. The UN has already named what some in Israel call a kangaroo court to investigate possible war crimes committed by the Israeli Defense Forces in Gaza. The appointed commission head, Canadian William Shabbas, won't even say if he believes Hamas is a terror group. Jerusalem says it won't comply with the commission, despite the UN's weak attempts to sound balanced.
Israel's duty to protect its citizens from rocket attacks by Hamas and other threats is beyond question. At the same time, the fighting has raised serious questions about Israel's respect for the principles of distinction and proportionality.
Hamas, meanwhile, tried to rally support among Gazans in case the most recent truce collapses, exposing the residents to another round of fighting. John Wagi, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Back here at home, torrential rains are causing severe flooding in states across the country. From this rescue in Arizona, where a man jumps from the roof of his car onto a fire truck, to Baltimore, where flash floods covered side roads, leaving people stranded. They also swamped the Baltimore Beltway, where traffic was backed up for hours. In Detroit, hundreds of abandoned cars stuck on flooded streets and highways. More rain is expected along the East Coast today, with flash flood warnings in effect.
The family of an American Christian detained in North Korea is pleading for his release. 56-year-old Jeffrey Edward Fowley has been detained for more than 2 months for so-called hostile acts against the country. He's suspected of leaving a Bible in a nightclub in the northern city of Chongqing. Fowley's wife and children, seen here with their attorney, apologized to the North Korean government, asking for mercy. In a statement, the family said they're, quote, desperate for his release and return home.
A bridal shop owner is refusing to sell wedding gowns to a lesbian couple, and that's stirring up debate in one Pennsylvania town. Members of the Bloomberg's town council are considering if they should pass legislation to make such action illegal. This comes after the owner of WW Bridal Boutique made headlines in the local paper. Victoria Miller told the Press Enterprise providing those 2 girls' dresses for a sanctified marriage would break God's law. Miller's attorney says such a sale violates her firmly and honestly held religious beliefs.
The Navy is removing the Gideon Bibles from every hotel room on its military bases. The American Family Association says the move came after a letter from the Atheist Freedom from Religion Foundation. The AFA cites a letter from a hotel housekeeper that said it was part of a new policy from the CEO of Nexcom. The director of the Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty stated, "A Bible in a hotel room is no more illegal than a chaplain in the military. It's tiresome to see senior military leaders needlessly cave into activist groups offended by anything Christian." There are 34 Navy Lodge locations and 24,000 Navy Gateway guest rooms on Navy bases worldwide.
Coming up, how can someone so funny on the outside be so depressed on the inside? We'll take a closer look at what really happened to Robin Williams. Legendary actress Lauren Bacall has died at the age of 89. The two-time Tony Award winner and Academy Award nominee died Tuesday at a New York City hospital. According to Variety, Bacall suffered from a suspected stroke. The actress was best known for her sultry voiced roles opposite her husband, Humphrey Bogart, in the movies To Have and to Have Not and The Big Sleep. She was also known for her confident expression, which earned her the nickname The Look.
Well, more details are emerging in the death of actor Robin Williams. Authorities say Williams committed suicide by hanging himself with a belt in his bedroom at his home in San Francisco area. Williams also had superficial cuts on his wrist, and a pocket knife was found nearby. The 63-year-old Oscar winner was last seen alive by his wife Sunday night before she went to bed. A personal assistant to Williams became concerned Monday when he failed to respond to knocks on his bedroom door. Williams had long struggled with substance abuse and depression.
Dr. Linda Mintle joins us now by Skype. She is a licensed family therapist and writes a blog at BeliefNet. Linda, Robin Williams made people laugh, but in his personal life, he suffered from deep depression. What can you tell us about the disease?
Well, it's ironic, isn't it, that one of the fixes and the helps for depression is laughter, and yet he wasn't able to have that same kind of internal sense of happiness and hope. Depression is it's the most common mental health illness in our country. It affects almost 9.5% of people in any given year, and it is very treatable. That's the one thing I want to say at the beginning, that it is something that we do have treatment for, but it is characterized by feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, changes in appetite, a persistent feeling of being sad and down, restlessness, irritability. In men, it tends to take more of an angry, irritable, restless kind of feel with depression.
I'm sure many people are wondering how a person who was so funny on the outside, how can they still have such internal struggles?
Well, that's the problem with depression, is that it's not something you can always see when you look at somebody. So anybody can put on a happy face. He went out, he did his job, he was very funny and entertained a lot of America. But in the inside, obviously, there were things that he was struggling with and some inner demons that he was dealing with. We know for a long time that in the 70s and 80s, he was very open about his cocaine addiction and struggles with that. We know that he had a 20-year period of sobriety and then fell off the wagon. And we know that as late as June of this year, he was back in recovery. So he was struggling a lot of this time with addiction problems. And we also know that in 2009, he had an aortal valve replacement. And people don't always consider the fact that cardiac procedures, especially surgeries, often have depression that accompanies them. So between the addictions, the cardiac surgery, and the personal issues of his life, obviously there was a great deal of turmoil that was going on inside that we didn't see on that very funny exterior.
Many people in our audience are people of faith, and they might think that depression shouldn't affect them. But as you said, it can hit anyone, correct?
It can hit anyone, and there are genetic markers for depression. Some people are just more predisposed to depression, and there are certain types of depression, like a bipolar depression, that actually has a pretty strong genetic organic link to it. So no one is really exempt. And if you are feeling down and you are feeling this persistent sadness, you need to get some help for that, because again, depression is very treatable. Now, the difference, I think, for the faith community is that depression is characterized by a pervasive sense of hopelessness and helplessness. And I would hope that as we talk to one another in the church about the hope that we have in Christ and the complete joy that is possible by having a relationship with God, by putting on the garment of praise, as the scripture says, for that spirit of heaviness, that there are prescriptive things that we can do in addition to our belief in Jesus Christ that can give us that hope that we trust would prevent someone from committing suicide with depression.
Up next, a cry for help from a single dad raising his autistic son by himself. Watch how both father and son get the support they need after this. Parenting a child is a huge joy and a tremendous responsibility, and if the child has special needs, it can be downright overwhelming, especially for single parents.
Paul Strand brings us the story of a place that's become a haven for special needs children and their parents.
When military couple Garia and Antonia Woodland gave birth to a son with autism, they felt they could handle it because they had each other.
Together we can beat this, we got this, we'll do it together, there won't be any challenge that he faces that will be that great that the two of us won't be able to handle.
But an unexpected challenge changed all that. Antonia, who gave up her military career to take care of their son, died from an aggressive cancer.
About 6 weeks after she found out, things got worse, and it was very quick, very unexpected.
Spiritually, Gary could hardly handle Antonia's death.
It plastered my faith. There's no denying that.
Grief-stricken, this busy soldier struggled on alone and found single parenting almost too much.
Challenging, overwhelming, depressing, and sometimes it just seemed that it was going to just be an ultimate failure.
Gary and his son Christian lived in near isolation because it was hard going out with the boy or finding others to care for and understand him.
Because unfortunately, people do judge your child.
Then Gary discovered Jill's House in McLean, Virginia, a ministry where trained Christian caregivers lavish love and attention on children with special needs, while giving their parents a much-needed break.
We are taking care of the most vulnerable that are close and precious to God's heart.
Jill's House is named for Jill Solomon, daughter of McLean Bible Church senior pastor Lon Solomon and wife Brenda.
By her first Thanksgiving, she had 17 grand mal seizures in that single day, which caused severe brain damage.
Caring for her grew into an often 24-hour-a-day job that utterly exhausted her parents.
Just being desperate for a night of rest, a night of sleep, just something, a break, is what led them to think that we need to do something different for families just like ours, because there's nothing out there that exists for them.
For parents of special needs children, their care can often become like a full-time job, even an around-the-clock one. And it's hard to find help because how many babysitters have the special training it takes to care for such children? And if you can't get breaks, some sort of respite, you yourself can spiral into a bone-deep weariness and sadness, even depression.
So the Solomons and their church built Jill's House as a model for changing the face of disability ministry across the country. It's become a sanctuary and place of joy for folks like the McNeils. This family found out several years ago both kids, Waverly and Oliver, suffer from a genetic disorder, stealing their physical and mental abilities, and likely to kill them before they reach adulthood. It was a dark day when Matt and Shannon heard the fatal verdict for Waverly.
Shannon's first question to the doctor, and it was a room full of doctors, which is never a good sign, but was, is she going to die? The doctor very matter-of-factly said yes.
But little Waverly had no idea as they drove away from the doctors.
Waverly was in the back seat singing If You're Happy and You Know It, which just heartbreaking to see her sweet little face in the rearview mirror in the back seat, just singing as happy as though nothing had happened.
Then came the same verdict for Oliver. As both kids began their downward slide, Shannon traded her outside career for what's become all-consuming care and endless therapy. Take just the last year.
We had almost 400 appointments when you added the doctor appointments.
The days and nights Waverly and Oliver stay at Jill's House give Matt and Shannon rejuvenating breaks they say help them be better parents. And it's magic for the kids.
It allows us to have experiences, or to see them have experiences that we thought they would never have, where they get to have sleepovers and go to day camp.
The McNeils gladly accept the help because they realize the odds are stacked against them and their marriage.
Having a child with special needs, your divorce rate goes up. The loss of a child, it goes up more. The loss of two, it's pretty high.
Instead of trying to make sense of Waverly and Oliver's fate, their parents focus on the good.
They've been given a very precious gift of life that they are living very well and beautifully and with dignity, and they touch a lot of people.
And they see their children bring out the best in some people, like those caregivers at Jill's house and friends who now reach out to help others with special needs.
I love finding those moments of grace and beauty that our kids kind of have inspired.
Daffron suggests letting God lead you in the best way to reach out to family or friends who might be in similar situations.
You don't see these families out and about in the community because it's difficult for them to be there. It's difficult for them to even just go to church. Just embrace them. Start something simple. You don't have to do something as big as Jill's house.
One plan includes using Christian camp facilities during their off-season because they are ready-made getaways for care and rest. If you reach out, you'll likely experience wonders and surprises. Like hearing from Sean, who was told he'd likely never speak, then said his first 2 words, Jill's house. Or Max, born without eyes and nearly deaf, yet displaying his musical gifts at Jill's house. Matt McNeil believes there are few deeds more divine than reaching out to these kids.
Jesus says, what you do to the least of these, you do unto me. It is hard to think of someone who counts as sort of the least of these than a kid who is born with everything just sort of stacked against them.
It's a ready-made mission for caring hearts. Paul Strand, CBN News, Jill's house, McLean, Virginia.
Finally today, the son of Ebola-stricken nurse Nancy Writebol says she is getting better. In an interview with NBC's Today, Jeremy Writebol says his mother's eyes have brightened and she's even joking a little. Jeremy says he was worried that she wasn't going to make it when she first arrived at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta last week. Now he says the doctors expect his mother to recover, but they haven't elaborated. The Ebola virus has killed more than 1,000 people so far. Thank God for her recovery. She's doing better.
Changes things
Amen.
indeed.
Well, that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
We want to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do it on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a wonderful Wednesday, everybody.